Please welcome the Chief Executive Officer of the John Birch Society, Mr. Arthur Thompson.
In reality, you're standing for yourselves because you are the people that really make things happen. We can have all the ideas that we want and so on and so forth, but you're where the rubber hits the road. And you're the ones that are making things happen. Yes, it's true that we're coming up with new initiatives from headquarters and such, but without your follow-up, without your organizing in the field, giving the synergy and focus to all of these things, they simply would not be successful. And so I hope that before you leave here this evening, if you don't know the person across the table from you, please introduce yourself, shake your hands, and just in camaraderie, have that welcoming and thank you for everybody in the room, because you're really the ones that make things happen. And believe me, you haven't seen anything yet. And I'm not going to talk about where we're going and some of the things that we're going to be doing, because quite honestly, ladies and gentlemen, I do not want to do anything to broadcast to the enemy what our next step and our next step and our next step is going to be. But we have plotted some of these things out, because you have to sit down and say to yourself, okay, now I'm a criminal. Now what am I going to do? How am I going to take over the country? How am I going to fool the American people? I'm this criminal. What would I do? And then you say, okay, that's what I would do. Now, this is what I'm going to do as a Bircher to stop it. So that's the kind of thinking. And in my case, I can think like a criminal real easy. At any rate, yeah, I'm not related to Hillary, no. Tonight, I want to talk about a few points regarding immigration. And I want you to just daydream for a minute along with me and think about seeing a broadcast on television. Pretend you're listening to this broadcast about a family of bank robbers. The newscast starts by stating that the local community is impoverished and families are simply having a tough time getting by. And there's one local family, it's the Jones family. John and Marie have had it particularly bad, and they've been moving from place to place looking for work, a decent place to raise their children. And they're called Tim and Jane. Well, Marie is pregnant again, and Jane is asthmatic, and so finding decent, affordable health care has been a problem for them. To make matters worse, Tim has a learning disability. So special education is an issue as well. Desperate times lead to desperate solutions, with John and Marie turning to robbery as a temporary solution until they can get on their feet. This is the newscast. But local convenience stores never seem to have the amount of money to provide a livable wage, let alone the ability to get ahead. So more and more of the clerks are arming themselves and making the prospect of getting shot a real possibility. So they turned to robbing banks, where the odds were slightly better for more money and less personal danger, hoping to raise their family out of poverty and provide care for their 2 children and the one on the way. Well, like most bank robbers, what happens? They got caught. Now they're in jail with Tim and Jane in foster care. From here on, the newscaster talks about the need to provide for desperate families such as the Jones, and even goes so far as to suggest that we forgive all, because the Jones family had no control over their lives and situation and were just simply looking for a way out. And after all, they never harmed anyone, even suggesting that we may need to even look at making changes to the laws given the circumstances. Nowhere in the broadcast is it even hinted that these people needed to be held accountable for their actions. This, ladies and gentlemen, with minor differences, is exactly how the American people are being sold amnesty and the acceptance of illegal immigration. In so doing, giving us stories that parallel the one I've just related. Everybody knows it's illegal, but the administration not only wants to forgive and forget in case of illegal immigration, they want to protect, reward, and promote the illegal activity. Now, how else can you explain the lack of enforcement of current laws and the farcical legislation that has come before Congress? Some of the provisions within these proposals have even been more dangerous than the amnesty, such as national identity cards, provisions to move the Security and Prosperity Partnership, or SPP, forward, etc. While we've seen massive opposition to these bills, we strongly suspect that the legislation may have been designed to fail, allowing the insiders to build a false leadership opposition and reacting people into supporting this false leadership and the false solutions that they would propose. It would not be the first time that we've been seen support build on our side, with that support later becoming our worst enemy due to their support of compromises, which then became difficult to stop. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who remember, that is how we got OSHA. We built strong opposition, but then that opposition compromised and OSHA went through. We almost stopped it. It is quite possible that a compromise reforming the immigration laws will come along that could be supported by enough of our less astute friends and confuse the grassroots opposition until it's too late to stop the legislation. Even worse, it could entangle the American people into supporting something that would help lead to their own demise. Keep in mind that the enemy is resolute, persistent, patient, and audacious. We have to be more so. Discouragement, helplessness, compromise are our enemies too. We cannot allow them to infect us and wear us down. And we Birchers need to be the serum to attack these feelings in others that we work with. Don't let them get discouraged. Boost them up. Now, we all know the SPP is, of course, the North American Union. The promotion of any aspect of this agreement in the long run negate any control over illegal immigration, since it will lead to the elimination of our borders. So any provision that says it's going to solve the immigration problem is a lie if there's any provisions of the SPP in it, because it will eliminate our borders. Any bills that does have provisions of the SPP, even when it doesn't call it that, must be defeated. Given an inch on any kind of a compromise of that nature is literally putting Lilliputian threads across the American Gulliver. But there's something that could turn out to be far more insidious. It is time to address a solution advocated by about anyone who wants to solve the immigration problem and has the possibility of being far more dangerous to the American people than any aspect of the problem it's designed to solve. There have been several attempts over the history of man by those who rule to either physically contain their own people or to keep others out. The Roman general Hadrian, who later became emperor, tried it in northern England when he built a wall from coast to coast. The Chinese tried with the Great Wall of China. The latest version was the so-called Iron Curtain, part of which was the Berlin Wall, but most of it was fences. Ultimately, they fail. But in the process, one is not really sure what it is the rulers want, to keep others out or to keep their own people in. That is the problem with walls. They work both ways. That is something we must remember when we call for a wall or a fence along our borders. Even if they do not initially keep you in, they make it more difficult to leave without some government control and regulation of who goes through the wall, where, and when. Our founder, Robert Welch, said this about the ability to leave one's country and its relationship to a citizen's freedom. It comes from the Bulletin Forward for July 1971. It was a series of questions to him and his answers. Quote, question: what is it that determines whether a nation should be classified as communist? Robert Welch's answer: there is one sure criterion. It is whether or not the people can leave that country at will. Every communist nation is simply a gigantic prison from which nobody is allowed to escape. This is shown by the tens of thousands who lose their lives every year trying to swim across the 5 miles from Red China to Hong Kong, or to get across the Berlin Wall, or to find their way through holes in the iron and bamboo curtains. The real point is that the people of the United States are still a long way indeed from having the prison walls of that kind closed around them. Question: what about free movement within a country? Robert Welch's answer: that is another test, as is the free use of one's own property or money. United States citizens can still take any or all of their money out with them, whether on a temporary trip or if they decide to leave for good. This is something that the people of Western Europe have not been able to do, except under tight controls for many years. The communist principle that all property really belongs to the government and can be used by favored citizens who have possession of that property only on the sufferance of the government is also being advanced by many pro-communist regimes. But the insiders still face quite a storm when they try to establish that principle here, and they will face a real test when they try to impose on the American people that aspect of slavery which prohibits free movement either within or outside of our country, unquote. Since this was written in 1971, our government has curtailed the ability of Americans to leave our country with even moderate sums of money. Likewise, the transfer of money within our country is monitored by the banks and reported to the government. Both of these developments happened prior to 9/11. After 9/11, the banking regulations have become very onerous. They're too lengthy to discuss here, but if you have any friends in banking, I urge that you sit down and have a conversation with them about banking regulations today. I think that you will be very, very appalled. And if you're a lover of the Constitution, and I expect you all are, you will find the conversation very shocking. Throughout the history of this country, we have had open borders. It is only recently that we've had a real problem with this. What has changed? A large part of what has changed is that we allow non-citizens to receive all the benefits of citizenship without the responsibilities. Free education, free medical care, Social Security, etc. Even voting in some areas. In some places, they even vote twice. Now, you think I mean that they're going to the polls for the same election. No. They vote both for the Mexican president and the United States president. There are polls in Chicago where that goes on, believe me. They are allowed to vote in both elections. So when people are looking to get out of poverty, the Jones family story becomes Juan's family story, and they steal from the system with the blessing of the federal government. Juan would stay home if he did not receive a number of freebies. As long as they are available to him, he will continue to cross the border and bring his friends and family. If you think this is bad, I find it interesting that few, if any, of the opponents of illegal immigration outside of the John Birch Society are talking about our own government going over to other countries and bringing back tens of thousands of people to live off the dole until they can stand on their own, you understand. This has included every country we've ever been at war with over the past few decades. Recently, they brought in 10,000 Hmong, H-M-O-N-G, into the Appleton, Wisconsin area, and I want to thank you for that. You helped pay for this. They did not cross over the border. They were flown in and settled into that area on the Dole. Now they're talking about bringing in thousands of Iraqis. And we never hear about that part of immigration. These subsidies have included rent, home repairs, low or no-cost loans, etc. These loans have been for homes, businesses, and the latter to compete with American family businesses. It's bad enough when huge conglomerates come in and wipe out family businesses that are the stalwarts of a vibrant middle class, but when our own government does it, that's absolutely appalling. It's outrageous that tax monies do that. The point, we will always get more of what we subsidize, and we're subsidizing immigration. Stop the subsidization of illegal immigration families, and it will help slow down illegal immigration substantially. Walls or fences will never stop people who are after a free lunch or loot. You might be thinking that what I'm saying is confusing. Do the insiders want to flood us with massive immigration as a step towards the North American Union, or a barrier? What I'm saying is this: they want an NAU. If they cannot have that, a wall will work for them in an alternative plan to subjugate the American people. And the joke on the Americans will be that they demanded it to save the country. You may not have noticed or old enough to remember, but we used to be able to cross our borders virtually without hindrance. Over the past several decades, the controls along the border have increased substantially, affecting citizens of this country more than those on the other side of our borders. They now want us to have passports to cross into Canada for the first time in our history, to have a national ID card, ostensibly to control illegals. But we are the ones that will have to show our papers. Illegals and criminals will always get false papers. The end result will be that all Americans will be less free. Free men do not need papers. Free men know who they are. And for the rest of the world, it's none of their business. So what's the solution? It's threefold. Number one, stop the subsidization of immigration, both illegal and legal. I'm not against legal immigration. I'm just saying you don't subsidize it. We used to have a system where we didn't subsidize immigration into this country. Two, institute a program based on the massive program under the Eisenhower administration of apprehending and deporting illegal immigrants. Not simply sending them across the border the way we do today, but taking them 500 miles south of the border, as was done then, and dropping them off there. It's awful hard for them to make it back from 500 miles. And here's the tough one, ladies and gentlemen. 3, break off diplomatic relations with Mexico until they stop aiding and abetting illegal immigration. Until they stop supporting the Aztlan movement of trying to get Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Nevada, and other parts of the United States to become part of Mexico. By forcing their consulates to close and go home, they can no longer have the ability to issue particular ID cards to illegal immigrants, enabling them to get driver's licenses, bank accounts, etc. Also, we need to stop foreign aid to Mexico. Finally, any Mexican army units that cross the border shall be fired upon. The other thing is, it would really shut down the NAU, wouldn't it? In the real world, we would have declared war against Mexico a long time ago for what they've been doing. Let us not forget that less than 100 years ago, General Pershing crossed into Mexico to put down Pancho Villa after he crossed the border and terrorized one of our border towns. Our border towns are again being terrorized. It's time to show that we mean business and to protect the sovereignty of the American people. Again, let us not fall for false solutions that will do nothing to prevent the current problem. Showing one's papers has been one of the hallmarks of a dictatorship and a precursor to curtailing of free citizens' movements. And so are walls.